Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of children and young people for Monmouthshire this morning. Croeso a bore da, croeso i'r cyfarfod plant a pobl ifanc yn Sir Fynwy bore yma. My name's Tudor Thomas. I'm Chair of Children and Young People, and I will be chairing this meeting today. We go to the agenda. And item 1 on the agenda is apologies. I'm not aware of any apologies at the moment. Okay. 2 declarations of interest, and I must declare an interest here for the Welsh Educational Strategic Plan item 4, because I am a governor at Ysgol Gymraeg Efenni in Abergavenny, but it's a non-prejudicial interest. Councillor Hughes, David Hughes-Jones.
Good morning, bore da. Similar to the chair, I am also a governor at Ysgol Gymraeg Efenni, so I declare the same level of interest.
Okay, thank you. Okay, diolch yn fawr. Now go to the next item on the agenda, public open forum. I've not been made aware of anybody wishing to speak to the committee this morning. So that covers item 3. We would go to item 4, which is the Welsh Educational Strategic Plan, but I'm going to switch 4 and 5 because the Chief Officer, Mr. Will McLean, has got another pressing engagement, and it's a relatively short item. So we'll go to, at the moment, item 5, which is a brief verbal update on the return to school and pandemic implications. So hand over to Mr. Will McLean. Thanks.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. Thanks for the opportunity, and thank you for facilitating the switch in the agenda as well. It's good to be with you this morning just to talk about how the return to school has gone in Monmouthshire, and just to reflect, I think, on some of the challenges that the return to school has brought, and some of the positives as well. So perhaps if I just start by talking to members about the change in the regulations that we saw at the start of this term. So members will be aware that prior to the summer holidays this year in 2021, there was a very strict set of operating guidance that was published by Welsh Government, which was amended fairly frequently over time to reflect where the pandemic was, the level of infection in schools and so on. Just before the end of term, there was some significant changes to that, which signalled that in the new academic year, so September 2021, we would be looking at a different model of operational guidance in schools. That was eventually published, I think it was on the 27th of August, and it really set aside, the new operational framework set aside all of the previous controls that had been in place in schools. I think, interestingly, in discussions with many of our primary schools in particular, I think it would be a fair reflection to say that they would have preferred the retention of the stronger compliance framework that we'd seen in the last academic year. But the direction of travel, clearly, as Wales as a nation went to alert level 0, signified that step then into the new framework. The new framework was in place for 2 weeks, in the first couple of weeks after the return to school, and then became fully implemented on the 20th of September, and the old operational guidance fell away at that point. So many of the controls that we got used to seeing in terms of things like masks in school, all of those fell away. The contact groups, the expectation that head teachers led on the identification of contacts in school, all of those requirements fell away. And it has led, I think it would be fair to say, to an increase in cases in our schools, and that has brought significant challenges for our school leaders and our school staff. It's probably worth just reflecting at this moment where we are in terms of cases in Monmouthshire, and I'll cite them as of yesterday because that's the latest figures that I had. So as of yesterday, our incident rate per 100,000 was 420. That was an up 94 from the previous 7 days. and for the first time in a week or so showed Monmouthshire moving away from kind of the bottom two position in the Welsh kind of table of local authorities. One of the interesting pieces of analysis that shows is the number of cases across all of Gwent who are in the age range 0 to 25, and that should give us a good sense around where our schools will be. And that age group having been very, very high at kind of mid-late September, 24th, 25th, I think it peaked, that had stabilised but was beginning to show signs of a slight increase yesterday. In terms of MCC's position, MCC is the second lowest Gwent local authority, Blaen y Gwent currently having a lower number per 100,000. And of all of the age ranges where there are cases in Monmouthshire at the moment, the highest is the 10 to 19 age range, and there's circa 170 in that age range. 0 to 9s is the third highest at about 40. And there are probably just about 50 cases in the 40 to 49-year-olds. So you can see that in terms of live cases, certainly focused on and around the younger part of the population. To tackle some of those challenges, there has been obviously the announcement by the 4 chief medical officers across the United Kingdom that those aged 12 to 15 will be vaccinated. They will receive a single dose of the Pfizer vaccine. That process has started and is being carried out at the mass vaccination centres for Monmouthshire residents in both Cwmbran and in Newport are the two places where the children go to receive that their vaccination. At the moment, across our schools, just to talk through how it's affecting the 4 secondary schools to start with, there are currently 289 cases in schools, right across the schools, which is the highest it's been for this term, and it's proportionately significantly heavier in secondary schools than it is in primary schools. So of those 289, only 96 are in our 30 primary schools. Of the secondary schools, and some of these numbers, there might not be a perfect correlation to yesterday's declared figures. There are currently 95 in King Henry VIII, 29 in Monmouth Comprehensive, 1 in Chepstow Comprehensive and 2 in Caldecott. Yeah, that's interesting, members, because we normally see it the other way, to be honest. We normally see the south having more cases than the north, but this time very significantly, and from the beginning of term, it's been the other way around, and the north has been harder hit than the south. We do have a number of primary schools where there are clusters of cases. Now that's not to hopefully sound too alarming. A cluster is a small, like a handful of cases, normally up to about 7. There are a range of different schools where that's the case, right across the council. So some, as you'd expect, given that prevalence in Abergavenny, some in Abergavenny, but also down in the south of the county as well. There are a few more cases emerging. So we're working very closely with our colleagues in Test and Trace. So Louise Driscoll and Tracy Evans are the immediate contacts for the schools. Working within the framework that's been set with Public Health Wales and our environmental health colleagues, we respond to those clusters and so on, and give advice to the schools about how they should respond. There are a range of warning and informing letters that first of all get sent home when there's a single case. As cases escalate, they become more formalised, and there's a slight change in the direction of advice. Members might also be aware that there's been some recent changes to the advice with regards to testing. So if you are now a close contact of a positive case, the advice is that for the first 8 days, as well as the PCRs on day 2 and 8, you undertake a lateral flow test every day during that period. So although the framework reflects a much more stable position, we're seeing amendments to the guidance with regards to testing from Welsh Government. The requirement for self-isolation for those under 18 has been removed. So we're seeing changes to the way in which schools are expected to work and to manage throughout this half of the term. And I think it would be fair to say that, well, I know it would be fair to say that COVID remains a significant challenge to the operational running of all of our schools. We met with all head teachers last Friday. It was rightly the first item on the agenda. It's an important discussion to have with our schools so that they understand, how we're responding to their support, to the support they need, to what we're being told by our public health colleagues, and how we're advising them. There have been several knock-on consequences. It's very difficult for schools to identify supply teachers to come in and support schools. So even though the vaccine amongst the adults has been seen very significant take up, we are seeing significant numbers of staff having to leave school to take tests or to care for children, or actually contracting COVID. And I think that's one of the things, that even those people who are double vaccinated are still able to contract it. So we're seeing significant staff numbers. And in fact, Sharon and I did a meeting with a primary school a week Monday last week, and the first thing the head teacher said was that they had 8 members of staff out that day related to COVID. This morning I met with the head teachers, the secondary head teachers, at 8 o'clock. Monmouth Comprehensive has got 8 staff out, Caldecott has got 6 staff out, King Henry the 8th 12 staff out. At their highest they had 15 members of staff out on one day. So I think the key first takeaway from this is that COVID remains a significant disruptor to the normal school day. The consequence, if we just think, for primary schools, is around trying to find that cover to work in schools. That isn't easy. People who are supply teachers don't necessarily want to travel, and they don't actually want to go into the teaching environment sometimes because they want to make sure that they don't contract COVID themselves. So that can be a challenge, and that's been reported widely around the accessibility of supply in primary schools. We're hearing in secondary schools that certainly the supply issue doesn't seem to be as challenging sometimes. But what that does mean is that you will often have supply or cover arrangements in front of examination classes. We're seeing significant disruption to attendance in secondary schools. So there's a range in Monmouthshire, probably going from about 91% down to about 82% in years 10 and 11. Obviously, those are critical years in terms of those groups who will be sitting examinations this summer. So not having specialist teachers in front of examination groups is a challenge and will have an impact in the summer. But listening to head teacher colleagues this morning across the region, there are some schools which have attendance in year 11 as low as 70%. And this feeds into a broader narrative discussion around the arrangements for assessment and qualifications in the summer. In the previous 2 years, there's been the position has been far more equal, in a sense that the lockdown pattern meant that people were far likely to have experienced the same thing because we all worked our way through those national lockdowns in a similar way. But we're seeing really significant disparity in terms of the impact. And even as I just talked about, then in the 4 schools in Monmouthshire, the difference between Chepstow and King Henry is very significant, with a difference of 94 pupils absent just today. So this is a real challenge for our schools in terms of how they manage this, and it brings a significant burden to them in terms of their leadership's well-being as well. It's not a return to normal this September in the same way that last September was not a return to normal, and I think it's really important that we recognise that. And in many ways, we need to attune our expectations in light of that. However, and there is always a however, we do have to maintain our expectations in terms of some of the external reform agendas that exist currently. So we know that schools are struggling with the COVID period of time. However, we also know that the new curriculum will be implemented from next September, from 2022. That's a significant challenge for schools. I've talked around the sparsity of supply teachers just to cover where people are off ill, when you add into that expectations around releasing members of staff to attend training, to do development sessions and so on for new curriculum, that can become a significant burden as well. So all of these pieces kind of layer on at the moment to make the teaching workforce and the school leadership workforce, I think, actually feel quite anxious. And I think there's quite a lot of pressure within the system at the moment in terms of how they feel they can maintain a good and effective school delivery model for the children day to day that is safe and minimises the risk of infection within the school setting, as well as meeting their obligations in terms of curriculum reform, in terms of ALN reform, in terms of our engagement with them, in terms of their what we term as our professional discussions. So there is a lot in play at the moment for our schools, and I think that is a challenge. I think particularly I would draw, in terms of the secondary discussion, their concerns around the equity as we head into the examination series I've just mentioned. So there is a lot in play. So although the regulations have changed, although we've seen the vaccinations brought in, we are still seeing significant disruption to the school day for many, and COVID remains a live and present disruptor in all of our schools. I think I'll probably pause there as second chair, and I don't know if people want to come in and ask questions, and hopefully I can expand on some of that.
Yeah, okay, thanks Mr. Clean. Thanks, Will, for that. Any questions, comments from the committee? Councillor Christopher Edwards.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Will, for that update. I was kindly invited by the headmaster of Chepstow School to come and see him recently. And although as daunting as that can be for someone of my age, going into a headmaster's office for the first time in a very long time, Mr. Sims was very generous with his time, and it was marvellous to get a flavour of what he and his team have done and turned Chepstow around back into a vibrant school again. And of course that includes how they've dealt with the effect of the COVID pandemic and adapted the school to the needs of providing a safe and well organised learning environment again. So a great sort of credit to the team down there, and of course yours as well. I just wanted to mention that, that's all.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Councillor Edwards.
I will say as well though that I did have a lateral flow test the night before.
Right.
And I was wearing a mask.
Right.
Thank you.
It's okay. Thanks for that. I'm sure they'd welcome that and not having any more infection. Councillor Martin Crocott.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd agree with those comments. Certainly from the point of view of King Henry VIII School, where the staff remain remarkably resilient and committed to providing the best education possible for the young people there. I've got a couple of points for Will. I know that almost as soon as there was the announcement that teenagers would be vaccinated, and I know Anaya and Bevan said they would not be doing this in schools because of the problems of anti-vaxxer campaigners. But nonetheless, as governors, we have been made aware that the senior leadership at King Henry have received some quite potent messages from anti-vaxxers, making quite nasty threats, some of a personal nature, against the head teacher and senior leaders around this issue of vaccination. I think these people are absolutely toxic. And I'd like some reassurance that if they can be identified, that action will be taken. Although having said that, what action, I'm not sure. But I think that they're absolutely appalling in what they're trying to do at the moment. Secondly, more to do with education, I suppose. Yes, you've quoted the number of teachers who, for various reasons around COVID, are not able to get on with their teaching at the moment. But of course, equally, they're not able to be keeping abreast with the development and the training around the new curriculum. And I know in this committee, we've heard from the National Education Union, and we've heard from NASUWT of their great concerns that staff are simply not going to be properly prepared to introduce the new curriculum. And as numbers of staff absent are high, and certainly at King Henry, as you said, Will, as high as they have ever been at any stage in the pandemic, is this posing a real threat to the effective introduction of the new curriculum? And thirdly, I know that Monmouthshire as a county, our attendance at school is among the best in the whole of Wales at the moment. But nonetheless, I know at King Henry, where Maureen and I are both governors, the leadership there is concerned that the most vulnerable children, who are often those who were historically the least likely to attend, are now not attending in some numbers. Now, you can try a softly approach, but maybe it brings out the old timer in me. I think that the days when the good old EWO, who we used to nickname the kid catcher, goes around and knocks on doors and says, why isn't your child in school? And it is the most vulnerable children who need to be in school who are sometimes the least likely to be in school. And this is causing me great concern. So a few points there, Will, if you could comment. Thanks.
Of course, thank you, Councillor Grocott. Yeah, so if I'll take those in the first of all, your comments around the correspondence around anti-vaccination. So I think certainly I think all of our secondary schools will have received letters from which are in essence kind of I won't use probably cut and paste or downloaded letters that do set out some and the language in them is poor language in terms of the way that they level that at head teachers. We've worked really well, I think, with our colleagues in and Bev, and I'm really grateful for the work that they've done. And Mes Bowley, one of the public health consultants, has met with the secondary head teachers to talk through the process. And in essence, and I think some of that perceived and potential risk that existed around things like the Gillick competence and so on, that the health board have certainly taken on the whole vaccination piece. And I think I'd agree that I was pleased that it's been done at the mass vaccination centres and not at a school level. Obviously in schools we do undertake vaccination programmes from time to time, but this is one that is rightly being done, I think, with the NHS taking the lead on that. If schools receive any type of correspondence, we work with our colleagues in the legal department, and there have been other instances in Monmouthshire where we've also escalated that to other agencies and work closely with them. So it's something which we are very aware of. It's something that no head teacher at any stage should be forced to deal with, and we're supporting our head teachers in how they respond to that. If I can take the point around attendance next. Richard Austin has done a huge amount of work both nationally and locally in terms of how we've been supporting our schools, in terms of the understanding of the Welsh Government's position. At the moment, their position remains that they don't want to bring back some of the more pecuniary kind of interventions in terms of school attendance, but we are really using the EWOs to make sure that we are engaging with those young people, to make sure that we do get them back into school, because you're absolutely right. They're very often those vulnerable learners who are the people we do want to be in school. And if year 11's running at 80% attendance, that's significantly below. I mean, normally in Monmouthshire we're normally mid-90s in terms of attendance, so that it does represent a significant fall away, due no doubt to cases of COVID and some of the requirements at other times in terms of testing and so on. But actually we really do need to make sure that those children are back into school. And I think There are some children who I think we've heard about. Certainly one of our primary head teachers was talking about, people who are taking advantage not to go to school, but when challenged, they do return to school. So I think that's positive. There will also be a cohort of learners who have significant anxiety caused by the pandemic and by their kind of really not wanting to engage in kind of broader kind of public life and wanting to be out. So I think there is a different approach for different cohorts within that, but I absolutely agree that it is really important that we work with all of our multi-agencies that we can and all of our teams at our disposal to make sure that those children do get back to school. And with regards to the curriculum, I think the challenge around the curriculum is really significant. I think that it is now 2.5 terms away from its implementation, and I think just that sense of teachers, because it will be devolved, and it should be devolved to a local level. This is something which whereas I suspect we'll see some commonality across clusters, but we will see some unique bespoke delivery within schools. This is for school leaders, for subject leaders, for phase leaders to really understand and engage with. And if there is a significant burden on those leaders to be engaged with the management of operational matters such as COVID and cover and so on, then you're absolutely right. It will take away some of their capacity to really kind of engage in it. However, they have had an extended period of time. So this isn't the announcement of the curriculum is not an immediate announcement. So they have had a period of time, and the pioneer schools and so on have been involved in it for a long time. But I think really the ability to engage at the moment, which is the point I think you're making, is a significant concern. So we're coming to the tight end. That's when you'd expect to see more engagement, but this paucity of supply to cover that, the operational burden that COVID has brought, are two significant concerns as we go forward. We're meeting with our Estin colleagues tomorrow, our local authority link inspectors, and that's one of the things which we're going to be talking about curriculum implementation tomorrow with them.
Okay, thanks, Will. We go now to Councillor Maureen Powell.
Thank you. Well, following on from that, actually, my question or my suggestion, do you not think that under the circumstances, it would be more sensible for the Welsh Government to postpone the new curriculum for at least another 6 months, if not more, to give us more time to get organised after the COVID and to get a chance for the teachers to be able to take it all on board in a better way? Because I mean, everything's happening at the moment because it's getting nearer and nearer, but surely they would be able to postpone it for so long. I don't know what you think about that.
I think, yeah, Councillor Powell, I think, when we had the new minister appointed at the election of the last government, or the current government, when they were elected, I think there was a moment in time when I think he undertook that review, and the change he made was around the delay in terms of secondary schools could choose to delay until 2023 and then implement for years 7 and 8 at that time. So that was the decision he took there. I don't think now where we are, my sense would be that I don't think they'll countenance a delay at this juncture. Yeah. But I don't know. I think it is, as I just said, I think there has been a significant period of development time. Obviously Successful Futures was published in 2015, so we're 6 years on from there. But that sense around it really does feel like we're in the last room, really, because it is 2.5 terms, and we know what else needs to be done in those 2.5 terms. But talking to our secondary head teachers this morning, got that real sense that they're looking, they're learning, they're trying where they can to empower their school leaders, their specialist curriculum leaders and so on, to really kind of develop that. I think the one challenge for you, certainly, and for us as a local authority, is that we will see significant variance in delivery across our schools, and that allied with the significant changes to the accountability framework will mean that how we give account for our school's activities to you and through you will be a significant challenge for us in the future, but that's something which we are working on with colleagues across the region. But sorry, that's a very long-winded answer to say I don't think they will.
Yes, thank you. I should have said that I am a governor of King Henry VIII, so I should perhaps a non-prejudicial interest. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Powell, and thanks, Will. Any other issues or comments? No. well, thanks for that sort of comprehensive update. I mean, just to sort of, very quickly summarising some of the issues that the councillors have raised. I mean, obviously, the level of infection is still quite worrying. And you say it's not over yet. It's people like to think that COVID has come and gone, but it's come, but it certainly hasn't gone. The effect of attendance in year 10 and 11 obviously is going to have an effect on exam candidates, and everything that I've read from WJC and Curriculum Wales is that next year results are going to be reined back in somewhat. They've climbed. There's been greater flexibility, but they're going to be reined in next year, and it's very difficult to try and assess the effects in different areas, isn't it, between, you say, Gwynedd and Monmouthshire, Cardiff, etc. There's no simple formula, whereas before everybody was out, whereas now some are in, some are back being affected by COVID. It is worrying, I think, the level of attendance generally, and as Councillor Groke had said, particularly on vulnerable learners, it's for some, it's probably a time when they can take advantage of the situation of COVID, going for tests, or that they've got some COVID symptoms, and I think that is worrying. And certainly from being on the corporate parenting panel, it does seem though that some children are almost were happier when COVID was full on and they were learning from home. The children who were not happy in a school context almost seem to be progressing a little bit better. But the reality is, vulnerable learners, school is the most stable bit probably of their lives, isn't it? For some children who are not in sort of organised homes, and where there is a structure, then school is that structure for them, and where they probably learn, well, obviously they learn the best, and where they've got support of teachers and other people. And lastly, the two things, pressure obviously on leaders. I think that's quite worrying. Whether you're a head in a primary or a head of a big secondary, it's a huge pressure to manage all of these things, and the pressures that obviously they come under from parents and from the local authority. And lastly, obviously, there's the additional pressure now that the curriculum is coming in. And from what you say, and certainly listening to Jeremy Miles, the minister, I don't think he's going to delay from what I've heard. So I think that's another additional pressure that schools are under. So I think we would like to express our thanks to all school leaders, excuse me, and in fact all teaching staff and staff generally in schools for still carrying on in still a very pressured situation. So thanks for that update. It's there are some worrying things in there I think for all councillors here on CYP.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think if I'm more than happy to continue to come back and to feedback, and as potentially, I guess, as we look towards the middle of the next half term, maybe bring back a kind of a written report actually, and that will capture in that some of the interventions, the work of the EWOs, and so on, and we'll actually be able to at that point, because we're still, although we're kind of getting quite close to half term, now it's the end of next week, half term, we're still quite fresh in the new year. So in terms of some of the data collection and so on, that will be a bit harder. But by that point in time, we'll be able to reflect back on what this half term has looked like. We'll be able to share that data with you in a written form, which will really help that in terms of your kind of understanding, and also kind of working with us to make sure that we're doing the best we can to support our schools as well.
Yeah, thanks for that. I certainly think we should agenda that and that we have a written report. But I think as the academic year progresses, and particularly towards the exams next year in May and June 2022, I think we need to be updated. It is a burning issue, isn't it? It's a very important issue for schools and obviously, you know, particularly for pupils and parents. So I will certainly take you up on that offer. So thanks, Will, for the update this morning, and
sure,
I'll let you go to your next meeting.
Thanks very much. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we move on now then, and let's say we switched items 4 and 5, so we go back now to the Welsh Education Strategic Plan, and this is to scrutinise the draft now of the WESP, and Sharon Randall-Smith, who's the Deputy Senior Officer who leads on this, will take us through now this quite hefty document, and I'm sure people have read it, but there's quite a lot to take in. So welcome, Sharon. I'll hand over to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think the WESP is quite a significant document, but because it's a 10-year and our long-term planning tool for the next 10 years, I think it really had to be for us to give sufficient detail for us to consider carefully about how we'll move forward. So the WESP in its entirety is to ensure that we improve the planning of Welsh medium provision, standards of Welsh medium education, and also to set a target for where we expect that to be. Clearly, as part of our WESP and the regulations, we will need to come back to you regularly to report on progress, which we'll do at the end of each year. So the current WESP now is out for consultation, and that has already begun and will close on the 6th of December. And from that, we will then take on board all of the comments that have been raised and look at including them wherever possible within the WESP. We think that the WESP has been quite ambitious in its original target of 120 pupils in reception and year 1 by 2032. At 120, we are 5 above the Welsh Government's target. However, the WESP itself isn't just about that, but about all the other things that go behind it and underneath it to be able to support that. So this 10-year WESP has 7 outcomes, and I know that we've discussed it before, but just to review, looking at more nursery children, increasing that number, looking at increasing reception and 5-year-olds in our schools in Welsh medium education, allowing more children, supporting more children to continue to improve their language skills through the medium of Welsh on transfer. So that's between our childcare settings into our early years settings, into our schools, and then from our primary schools into secondary schools. Looking at learning for assessed qualifications and increasing the number of our learners, whether they're first language or second language, in doing that. Creating more opportunities for our Welsh learners and first language Welsh speakers to use Welsh in different contexts and as part of their daily life. A big focus for us is looking at Welsh medium education and our duties in relation to the ALN Act, and that is included within the WESP. And finally, one of the things that is an underpinning outcome is looking at the number of teaching staff and general services that we can offer who can work through the medium of Welsh to support our growth, but also to ensure that we're complying with our regulations in regards to the Welsh Language Act, but supporting Welsh generally and promoting it across the local authority. So the WESP is one of the drivers towards 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050, and also interfaces very clearly and closely with our Welsh language strategy, which is in the process of being reviewed. So the session today is part of our formal consultation, and therefore I'm more than happy to take any questions that you have with regards to the WESP.
Okay, thanks, Charlotte. Excuse me. Anybody now then, any member of the committee who would like to raise questions or comments on the current WESP? So start with Councillor Joe Watkins.
Thank you very much. Good morning. So in terms of the strategy that you've put forwards, I've got two main areas of question, if that's okay. You talk about the late immersion provision for when children are coming to a Welsh medium school when they haven't previously been learning Welsh. Could you give some more details on how that will work? That's particularly pertinent to me because I'm down in the south of the county in Caldicot. So it'll be our Welsh local school that will be undertaking that. And then the other area is
Joe just stopped, just frozen. Sorry, you froze there, Joe.
Yeah, it all went blank. Sorry, at least I'm back. Okay, so I'll begin again. ALN provision in Welsh medium, and in particular speech and language therapy. Speech and language therapy in the medium of Welsh, I know, is a big issue throughout the entire of Wales. There is a real shortage of Welsh medium speech and language therapists. It's vitally important, especially for those very early days when a child, if they've been brought up in a Welsh speaking home, won't be able to communicate through the medium of Welsh. And if they're struggling with communication, won't be able to communicate with English rather. If they're struggling with communication, then that'll be made even worse. What is our provision as a local authority for tackling speech and language issues through the medium of Welsh? Do we have any particular partnerships that we're working that around, and what is our strategy for dealing with all of that? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your questions. I'll take one at a time. The late immersion provision that we've identified within the WESP is actually something that we have started as a pilot. The local authority have funded a pilot so that we can develop the right model for us. Now, across Wales, Welsh immersion is evident in many authorities, but it looks different in each of the authorities depending on what the starting point is, where they need to move to, the rurality, the proximity to the border, and so there isn't one size that fits all. So what we've been doing with Ysgol y Ffin is to do some research behind different models. They visited lots of other schools that are offering Welsh immersion provision within the region and outside of the region. We've had contact with colleagues across Wales. We've worked with Welsh Government, looked at different models and have started to develop our own. Over time, we need to recognise that our immersion model will change, but at the moment, we have 2 pupils who are receiving some intense Welsh language support for a proportion of the day, and then spending time within their own classes so that they have full access to the curriculum. At the moment, it's in Ysgol y Ffin because that's the area where we know we need to grow the opportunities for Welsh medium education as soon as we possibly can. And thinking about our aspirations to have 120 per cohort in the future, we need to be looking at this more broadly across the local authority. If there's another school that, when we look at our 3rd school in the Monmouth area, we will need to be able to support the development of that. And the immersion provision at the moment will look at how we will scale up that provision over time. Welsh Government have just announced that we are able to apply as a local authority for a Welsh immersion or a latecomers to Welsh immersion grant. That means we can apply for up to £100,000 to use with it before the end of March. We will have our application form in for that, and we know how we will use that in order to accelerate some of the things that we've already put in place, particularly as well things like training for our Welsh medium schools in the delivery of immersion techniques, which are helpful across all kinds of learning. So at our next WEF, not the one today, which is our consultation, but we will be presenting where we are with that process. So we can also at some time come back, or in our update, come back to select and share that with you too, if that would be helpful.
Okay.
So that's the first question. The second one is about ALN provision in Welsh medium. We know that it is one of the challenges, not just for us, but across the region generally, in securing support for, particularly health services through the medium of Welsh. Monmouthshire, we struggle to do that. In our team, we have one Welsh-speaking member of our SPLD team, which is hugely beneficial to us and to our Welsh medium learners. But looking wider, we're going to have to work with an Iron Bevan Health Board to secure more Welsh speakers in those services that we need to support our youngsters, particularly our younger learners with speech and language and communication. And Jackie and her team are working closely with that, along with other regional colleagues, so that we can move that forward as quickly as possible. You are absolutely right. It's really difficult to find people with that expertise, with the skills to deliver it, and also with the ability to speak Welsh. And it's a challenge for all of us. Hence the ambition to do that within the Life of the West. However, nobody is underestimating that challenge.
Okay, thanks, Sharon. Thanks, Councillor Joe Watkins. Go to Councillor David Hughes-Jones now then, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning again, Sharon. My concern lies around the pupils that are moving from primary to secondary education, and in particular from Ysgol Gymraeg Efenni to Ysgol Gyfun Gwynlliw. And over the past few years, many pupils have been withdrawn from Welsh medium education because of circumstances at Ysgol Gyfun Gwynlliw. I'm not going to enlarge upon that. Now then, question really hinges around how these pupils are being catered for, and I'm aware that King Henry School in Abergavenny are making classes available for many of these students to pursue first language GCSE, so that they will have a qualification, and that's very creditable and laudable of King Henry School, and appreciate that. But it's going away really from the immersion that helps language develop and the culture that develops alongside it. So the main question is there anything that Monmouthshire County Council can do or are doing to help this significant number of pupils and to avoid the drain of such pupils in the future from Welsh medium education? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Certainly, it is. We have to understand that it is parental choice. However, there is a concern that the numbers transferring are lower than they have been historically. So we are part now of quite a newly formed partnership board with Torfaen, in order for us to be able to look at the issues and challenges that are arising in our pupils transferring over, but generally looking at the quality of education and ensuring that we can increase that transfer over to Ysgol Gyfun Gwynlliw. We know that there are ample places in the school for many years for our students and want to continue that relationship. And I think that will be very positive going forward in looking at how we will manage that. I know that particularly again with Ysgol Yscoed in Newport, they have set up their immersion provision as well there to enable and encourage more students to move across from primary into secondary in that area as well. So over the period of time, we hope that we will increase the transfer rate. There is also within the West a note that we are in discussions with other local authorities to be able to look at another secondary provision, which might enable some of our learners to travel in less time to a secondary provision. I know that one of the things we've heard from our parents is that pupils who are travelling from Monmouth to Abergavenny can manage that for the primary period, but it's really challenging then to add the journey time to Ysgol Gyfun Gwynlliw on top of that. So there are discussions around that to look at something within the Band C of 21st Century Schools programme.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We go now then to Councillor Louise Brown.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just going to ask about the outcome one, which was basically about more 3-year-olds receiving education through the Welsh medium nursery provision. In view of the fact that a number of nurseries are private nurseries, how would you envisage this this happening? And I appreciate that the policy tends to be to immerse people in in the medium of Welsh in order to have that as an everyday language, but wondered whether, in view of the number of Welsh speakers, whether consideration had been given to having nursery provision that actually covered a dual language, you know, so that it was basically English and Welsh, because I would have thought that, you know, in terms of staffing of nurseries, not necessarily that there are that number to increase the speaking of Welsh. And I just wondered how this had been considered and worked out, and how you were going to tackle this. I suppose the other question I've got is also about you know, people who aren't particularly good at different language skills, and how this would affect them, because if they have a household where it's where Welsh is spoken all of the time, it's a bit different to having a household where English is spoken all of the time, and then being immersed in a Welsh education system. So I think there are some issues there, and I'd be interested to hear the response on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brown, for your questions. So if I deal first with the question about outcome 1, which is looking at increasing the number of children who are in early education provision. So we work very closely with Mudiad Maithrin, who are an organisation who help us to set up childcare facilities through the medium of Welsh. We have 3 within the county linked closely to the schools, and within the Life of the West, we look to increase this to 5, which will provide up to, I think we've increased up to 63 places now, which is quite significant, and just over half what we would be looking for by the end of the 10-year period. This means that they will help us to find and recruit Welsh medium practitioners to work in those settings. I must say, again, it's a challenge. It links very clearly to outcome 7 about the workforce, but it is a challenge to do that, but we have managed to achieve that to date. Our youngsters will then have the opportunity to transfer into Welsh medium nurseries. There's already one at Ysgol y Fenni, there will be one at Ysgol y Ffin, and obviously if we look to the new school in Monmouth, we'll look at how that works within that provision. We also know that our practitioners, be they in one of our non-maintained settings or in our schools, are already having access to significant opportunities for training to develop Welsh medium, Welsh language in our English medium schools, and obviously that training is available as well to maybe some of the practitioners in Welsh medium schools if they would like some further help and support. So we're trying to ensure that we're building up Welsh language skills across the whole of our cohort of learners, so that wherever they are, be it in Welsh medium or an English medium setting, they will have at least some command of the Welsh language. That is not taking away from the fact that Welsh medium education provides greater opportunities to develop Welsh language and to be completely bilingual in both. So if I come on to your second part of your question, the majority of our learners who are accessing Welsh medium education at the moment are indeed from English medium homes. That's more likely to be the case in the south of the county. And one of the things that we have found over the past number of years is that parents at some point are quite reluctant to engage in a Welsh medium education for their children if they don't speak Welsh themselves, and they feel that they're not able to help their youngsters. So as part of what we're looking to develop through our immersion is how we support parents with that too. There are lots of things that other authorities have used and deployed successfully that we can look at within Monmouthshire. And I know that when during the pandemic, our Welsh medium schools were very proactive in providing a lot of additional support for parents to support their youngsters with learning. And gave them lots of confidence. For example, they were reading stories in Welsh for the children every day so that they could listen to that and engage with the language. But also, you know, I think we can look a little further to how we offer supportive sessions for parents themselves.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Very comprehensive answer. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks. And we move now then to Councillor Christopher Edwards.
Thank you, Sharon, for presenting that plan. I think all the other councillors have covered the main concerns regarding Welsh medium education. I was going to look at this in a different way, but I think I see you've just answered the question to Louise, which is partly covers what I was going to ask. Obviously, much is made of the border area, where you're more likely to have English speaking or people of sort of historic English families residing in that area. And on page 8, I think, of the plan, it does mention about the disproportionately high number of pupils choose out of county provision at either Wydeen or the Welsh School in Newport. I mean, obvious reasons why they would choose the Welsh School in Newport. But has any study or survey been carried out as to the reason why Wydeen is chosen by some pupils or parents?
Although we know that students and parents make that choice when they decide to transfer at year 7, we don't always know the reasons. So sometimes it is because there is a choice, their sibling is already at the school. Sometimes families have relocated into Monmouthshire but have that link with the school and continue to do that. There may be opportunities for them to consider what is on offer in both schools. The curriculum offer in Wales is very different to the curriculum offer in England. And sometimes parents look at it and look at their child as a learner and make the decision based on that. So there are, various reasons for that, sort of transfer at year 6 into year 7. I think it's a similar pattern in other authorities who are in the same sort of position. And I think Wydeen and Chepstow are so very close together as well. It gives parents a lot of parental choice.
Thank you, Sharon. I was just wondering about how much Welsh in education is affecting those, English families, if we can call them that.
I think there's always provision for English and Welsh medium families, so the choice is still there for both. What we know is that Welsh parents who wish to select a Welsh medium education don't have quite the same level of choice as those that have who want to have an English medium education. So the WESP, as it is at the moment, is to increase the opportunities for parents to engage in that, as they wish to do so, and for us to promote the benefits of bilingualism, of which there are many.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thanks, thanks, Councillor Edwards. Let's see, Councillor Brown's got a hand up again. Yeah, Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's following on from the question that Councillor Edwards was asking. I think it would be useful if there was a survey undertaken, in terms of choice between continuing on in Chepstow and Wydeen. I mean, not just making a general comment, with regard to these sort of factors. I mean, it may be, as you say, due to having a sibling there already, or, it may be other factors. And it may be, for example, things like the subject areas that the particular schools specialise in. Because I know my son was interested in basically the mathematical side, and at that time I think Wydeen had a good reputation for the maths side. I don't know what the situation is currently, but I think parents look at things like differences in results for schools when generally choosing between schools, and those are I mean, obviously there's transport that's a reason as well, but at the time my children actually didn't want to learn Welsh, and that was one of the reasons why they said that they wanted to go to Wydeen as opposed to Chepstow. And I think, there should be, some consideration with regard to pupil choice on this particular matter, because although I appreciate that you know, the Welsh Government are very keen on Welsh medium and, you know, reaching the target in terms of the number of Welsh speakers, I think you know, pupil and parental choice is still important in relation to these issues. Okay, thank you.
Sharon, you want to come back?
You know, certainly to say, I think it would be reasonable for us to look at the reasons on transfer, but we can't always guarantee that what we get back would be accurate or a full response in many ways. I'm sorry, Councillor Brown, I missed a little bit of your question because I was logged out. But certainly, you know, I think from my experience, parents do make considerations based on their children, even within our schools, within Monmouthshire. So that would, you know, that's right and proper. And it will be difficult going forward to compare things like results because we don't publish results anymore. You know, Welsh Government have taken that view that schools will know what their results are and it's not used as an accountability measure. So I think going forward, things might look a little bit different, might look at experiences, but again, it will come to parental choice and the needs of your child.
Okay, thanks, Sharon. You know,
Yes,
the only comment that I would make, yes, do you want to come back again, Councillor Brown? Because, you know, we've in danger now of going off the West and going into, you know, why children are not transferring to YD, and that really is more for a discussion. You know, when we actually look at Chepstow School and that area, you know, this is not really within the remit now of WESP. So, you know, unless it's really to do with WESP now, I'm going to have to, you know, call a halt really.
Yeah, just
because it's
comment.
it's not to do with WESP, is it? Really, it's about people
Well,
making.
I think it is to do with WESP because you know, it's about both parental and pupil choice on whether they go for Welsh medium education or whether they go for English medium education. So I do think it's relevant, Chair. Thank you.
Well, yeah, well, you say Welsh medium. Obviously, children in maintained schools in Monmouthshire have an element of Welsh, don't they, at primary and secondary level? But WESP predominantly is about Welsh medium, unless I've got that wrong, Sharon.
WESP is about Welsh medium, but also looking at developing the Welsh language and all of our learners the opportunity to be able to speak Welsh, because in the future it will be a significant skill for employment. And even if they haven't had the opportunity to attend a Welsh medium school, a certain level of competency within Welsh language will be helpful to them. And it's a statutory part of the curriculum that we have to offer in Wales. Therefore, you know, it's something that our schools will offer. And that's why one of the outcomes in WESP is to look at increasing the number of learners who are assessed through the medium of Welsh.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Okay, thanks for that. Just a quick sort of comment or observation myself personally. Looking at the West, I'm just somewhat disappointed that, you know, the new seedling school in Monmouthshire, in Monmouth rather, is not going to come on board until September 2023, and obviously that's been in the offing now for, you know, for some time. I'm looking at the map of Monmouthshire, which is obviously, you know, it's a large authority. For pupils in that area to travel either to Ysgol y Ffin or Ysgol Gymraeg y Fenni, it's quite a long journey, isn't it, as a small child, and there is obviously quite a bit of interest in terms of things like Maithrin in the Monmouth area. So I'm just slightly disappointed that you know that it's another 2 years from well, not quite 2 years from now. So I do feel somewhat disappointed in that.
Just to, if I can come back,
yeah, thanks.
Mr. Thomas. I think it would be fair to say that the local authority have spent quite a significant amount of time trying to find a suitable solution for We've looked at the area within the town. We've looked at an alternative suggestion outside of the town itself. And, you know, there have been challenges within all of those aspects. As you know, you've been involved in some of the consultations yourself about whether we looked at Raglan or we looked at somewhere within the town. Very recently, we've confirmed that all of the available land that it would be of a particular size or a suitable size is not available to us, and or it is part of, you know, areas which are designated as floodplains. So that means it's really difficult. So now we have to look at something which is slightly different. And that means that we'll have to look at within our existing provision to be able to see where we can house a seedling school. That will involve, quite rightly, formal consultation, and that is going to take a period of time. And, you know, I do understand and appreciate your disappointment. However, we are going to be confined now by those consultation periods. And obviously, we're looking at 2023. If things move faster, then of course we'll move faster, but we cannot change those statutory timeframes, I'm afraid.
Okay, thanks for that. And any other, excuse me, any other comments or questions from members of the committee? No, well, okay. Thank you very much, Diolch yn fawr, Sharon, for giving us a flavour of that report. And obviously we've had a chance to read it. It's a very comprehensive report, and we've had issues raised this morning on late immersion techniques, which are important really when children move from other areas, and when perhaps very small children go into mithrin and into reception, but other children are going into key stage 2, you know, and if you want to keep your children together. Issues about ALN provision, which are obviously crucially important. The issues about primary to secondary, which Councillor Jones raised, with issues with Gwynllaw, which I think we need to keep an eye on, and certainly to press in terms of probably, you know, secondary provision on a sort of tripartite arrangement between Powys, Blaenau Gwent and Monmouthshire. I think that, you know, that is very important in terms of travel time. And then also Councillor Louise Brown brought up the issue about mithrin provision, early years provision, and perhaps having bilingual provision there. The challenge as well of really the workforce, and I think that's a huge challenge in a county like Monmouthshire, and I hope that we will keep on encouraging and providing training for particularly teachers who have some proficiency in the language but not confident enough to think that they could go into a Welsh medium school setting or school. And I think that, you know, that is crucially important. And also this support for parents. You know, the reality is that in South East Wales, probably 90% of children going to Welsh medium schools come from English-speaking backgrounds, and it doesn't really seem to affect their performance. But I can understand from a parental point of view, if you can't operate in that language, particularly with COVID, it's been a huge challenge for parents and obviously for Welsh medium schools to support them. So once again, thank you very much for coming to present such a hefty document, which obviously we will come back to, and it's bound to evolve, isn't it, over the next, you know, things will change over the next 10 years. Things are bound to change on probably a fairly regular basis. But once again, diolch yn fawr, thank you very much for coming this morning and giving up of your time. Thanks. Okay, we'll move on now then, and we'll go back to the next item on the agenda, and we'll look at the forward work plan. The next meeting that is agended for this committee is 2nd of December, and at the moment we've got free school meal strategy on there, employment and skills, and budget monitoring. We've also been promising to look at the issues in Chepstow, which you've touched on this morning, which are crucially important. But I wonder if the scrutiny officer, Hazel Eilert, would like to come in on just to give us a sort of update at this juncture.
Yes, Chair, just to say that we don't anticipate that the free school meals strategy will be ready for the next meeting. There's quite a bit of work to do for that, and we also need to bring back ALN, which isn't on your planner scheduled in there, and that should come before FSM. So we need to sort of push those dates back. But I think in the pre-meeting, members suggested that they would like an item to be added to the next meeting, which was a discussion on Chepstow School. So I've asked Sharon if she can stay here for the work programme so that we can just clarify from members exactly what it is that they would like. We've got other items on that meeting agenda, but just to be sure, you know, what the request is, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any member views people would like to see on coming up on the December meeting? Because obviously FSM is not going to be there. Would members be happy to look at the issues regarding Chepstow? Sure. Yeah, Joe.
Yes, I think it's probably a really good idea for us to look at the Chepstow School situation, because it's been raised both in our CYP meetings and in full council, and so clearly it's a very pertinent issue for the current time. So I think it would probably be a good idea for us to tackle that one a bit sooner rather than later.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Watkins.
I'll second that.
Peter Edwards, do you want to come in on this?
I'll definitely second that, Chair. As we've discussed it a number of times briefly, it would be good to discuss it at the next available meeting.
Yeah, okay, thanks. I appreciate that. So I get the feeling of the meeting that on the December meeting, we'll look at the Chepstow School issue, and we've touched on it today. And we'll also look at employment and skills, which is important, and a brief update on budget monitoring. Just looking in thinking about it, we'll need to be quite specific in terms of officer preparation. I don't know, Sharon, would you like to make a comment? It's you know, what sort of steer you would like?
Well, it depends really what you would like at Select, but I would just remind everyone we are not in a position to be able to be sharing information, academic performance, because that's something Welsh Government have taken a view on, and that's what we are maintaining. However, if you can explain or share with me what you particularly want us to focus on, then we can go away and prepare a report that's suitable for you.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. That's helpful. Chris Edwards or Louise Brown, you're both councillors in the Chepstow area and obviously know the issues there, you know, far better than I. Would you like to offer a steer on that? Councillor Brown, yeah.
Yes, thank you. I mean, obviously, Chepstow is a school, is an area where my pupils from my ward go to. But also it's within Councillor Edwards' area as well. But I think one of the things that we're very interested in is the update on the progress with regard to the new school building, because I appreciate that it's in the next tranche, but you know, preparatory work has to be done on this, and I understand that there was somebody who's been appointed to actually look at that sort of thing. So I think that would be very helpful in terms of how it's progressing, because these things do take quite a long time in terms of preparation, and you know, they have to have project people and so forth appointed. So I think it would be useful to have an update on how it's progressing, so that when we come to the stage of putting in the next application, which I think is for 2024, as far as I know, that we are at a stage where we're ready to go straight away. I think that's what I'm interested in, you know, because these things do take an awful lot of preparatory work, and I do believe that there's somebody who's been appointed to sort of get involved in the liaison with the local schools and so forth. Is that right, Sharon?
You're on mute, Sharon.
We have a 21st century school manager and also an additional person there, so they will be looking at schools. Obviously at the moment you can imagine that their focus is in the Abergavenny area, just for the time being. But I think as things move forward, then they will look to that to the Chepstow area. I'm not sure what their work programme is, but I'm sure that we can provide you with an update at the next meeting.
Yeah, I mean, it's just to make sure it's off and ready when when the time comes, and that I think I think on previous occasions, I think it's to make sure all the applications and everything that are needed are ready, because I think there was previously applications that were done, and we weren't aware that, for example, that the because of the state of the buildings, that Abergavenny was chosen over Chepstow, and we found out later on about these particular applications, and we want to be involved in the ongoing process, really. I think, unless Councillor Edwards has got anything to add on that, I think that's the focus that we're interested in. Thank you.
Okay.
I think you've covered, yes, the main points there, Councillor Brown. Also, I think we would like to perhaps discuss things that can be put in place while we're waiting for this 21st Century Schools programme to have a huge impact on the school in Chepstow. I know some excellent refurbishment has been carried out recently, which I viewed the other day, but it seems that how can I put this? Not sort of every classroom is in an ideal situation. Some are sort of transforming into that ideal situation. So it would be good to have a discussion around what could be done while we're waiting for everything to take place and progress well with the 21st Century Schools programme.
Okay, I think part of the problem, even though free school meals is going off the December meeting, we've still got employment and skills, which will take us some time, and we've got budget monitoring that is slightly shorter. I think my suggestion would be that we have a brief update and discussion. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sharon, but I can't see that there's a huge amount to say at this stage, vis-a-vis Chepstow, in terms of Band C development, etc. And I can understand the concerns of councillors in the Chepstow area, and if I were a councillor there, I would have exactly the same concerns. But shall we go for a fairly brief agenda item of an update and some discussion? But there isn't a huge amount that can be said really at this stage, unfortunately, and I can understand the frustration of people in Chepstow, and obviously their representatives on this committee today. So unless people are going to shoot me down, I would suggest a very brief update on the Chepstow situation and some discussion, which we will look at in the December meeting. Councillor Brown, do you want to come back?
Yeah, I prefer it not to be too brief. Obviously we've had quite a lot of focus in the CYP on Abergavenny, and I do think originally Chepstow and Abergavenny were supposed to be developed at the same time, and they haven't been. So I think from a Chepstow point of view, we want to be pushing this project as much as we possibly can, and obviously want to know all the preparatory stages to it. And if we have too brief a discussion, we won't be pushing on that particular agenda. Thank you.
Okay, my understanding, again, Sharon can correct me, but obviously the decision has been taken by Monmouthshire County Council to develop one school at a time, really, and I don't know. My understanding, and obviously I'm not in the controlling group, but yeah, I'm not saying that it's going to be too brief, but we have got a reasonably full agenda on that day. So, Sharon, do you want to come back at all?
Just to say that it might be worthwhile just setting out the timescales for you.
Yes.
As part of that update.
Yeah, that would be good, and then we can have some discussion on that. So we'll certainly look at Chepstow, have a call for an update, and discussion on what's happening and when. I think is that a fair summary? Okay, we'll go on that then. So that's obviously we've now decided the December agenda, Chepstow brief update and discussion, and then employment and skills, and obviously budget monitoring. So we'll hold on that. In terms of the next item on the agenda, the Cabinet Forward plan, that is obviously for information. And then 8, confirm the minutes of our previous meeting. Somebody like to move that?
Yeah, I'll move them, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Grocott.
I'll second them.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. So everybody happy with the minutes? Yes. And
yes,
the
Chair.
last, yeah, thank you. The last item on the agenda is to confirm that the next meeting is at 10 o'clock on the 2nd of December. Thanks for your inputs today from Senior Officers Will McLean and Sharon Randall-Smith, and also from all the members on the committee. I'll draw the meeting now to a close. Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Chair. Diolch.
Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Tudor. All the best,
Thanks.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Tudor. Bye.
Yeah, thank you, Maureen.